Last week, a confusing set of 7 gun measures failed to pass the US Senate. I say confusing because some of them, perversely, aim to make gun ownership easier. This was in the face of extraordinary public pressure to do something. But Professor David Hemingway of Harvard School of Public Health and the director of the Harvard Injury Control Research Center in Boston thinks the answer is to take a public health approach to guns in the same way as we have to road crashes.
That's right. We can't continue to be so out of line with all the other developed countries in terms of letting our children die and letting our young people die from guns.
What are the statistics?
It's incredible. We are way out of line in terms of gun violence and gun crime. And so if you look at, say, just the 5 to 14-year-old children, you could pick any age group or any gender. But a child in the United States is 13 times more likely to be murdered with a gun than an average child in the other developed countries. And a child in the United States is 8 times more likely to commit suicide with a gun. A child in the United States is 10 times more likely to be unintentionally killed with a gun. And our non-gun suicide rate, our non-gun homicide rate for these children is average.
So if it wasn't for guns?
It looks like if it wasn't for guns, we'd be an average country. We could still do better. Australia could do better. France could do better. But we are just such an anomaly. People around the world just don't understand us.
Is it about gun ownership? Because there are a lot of other countries in the world with high gun ownership, like Sweden, for example.
Right. It's partly gun ownership because we have so many handguns, but it's also our very weak gun laws. We have by far the weakest gun laws of any developed country. We make it incredibly easy for anybody to get a gun, people without training, people who have criminal backgrounds. There's no background checks on a lot of gun purchases, for example, in the United States.
Now, you talk about taking what's called a public health approach to guns.
Yes. There's been so many successes in public health that you can learn so many lessons. The area I would like to have an analogy with is cars, because in the United States we're always going to have lots of cars, and I think in the United States we'll always have lots of guns. And we've done so much better in terms of motor vehicle crashes. For example, in the 1950s, we were always told that the reason we have so many deaths was because of drivers. Drivers were behaving stupidly, drivers were behaving aggressively and illegally. And so very much like the gun lobby today.
It's not the car.
No, it's not the car, it's the driver. It's always the driver. That's right. And that's what the car manufacturers, in effect, were saying. What the gun lobby says now is it's the driver's fault. Cars don't cause death. It's drivers cause death. And so all our focus was on driver's ed and enforcing the traffic laws. And it wasn't really until public health physicians asked the different question, not who caused the accident, but what caused the injury, that we looked differently. We found that people were being killed when their chests went right through steering columns, which were not collapsible. Their faces were lacerated when their heads went through glass, which was not safety glass. They were thrown from the car. And public health physicians began saying, can't we have airbags in cars? Can't we have seatbelts? Can't we have collapsible steering columns? Can't we have safety glass and windshields? And
can we have divided roads?
And can we have better roads? Because we would plant trees and lampposts right along the sides of roads, and people would die. And so,
I mean, guns are meant to kill, so
yes.
How do you make a gun safer?
Oh, there's lots of ways to make guns safer. There's lots of things that manufacturers can do. There's lots of things that dealers can do. But let me go back just to the motor vehicle thing, is to recognize that 60 years later, nobody thinks drivers are any better, but fatalities per mile driven have fallen over 90%. Which is incredible. And the goal is to make a system where it's hard to make mistakes, hard to behave badly, inappropriately, and when you do, not that many people die. And we can do that in the gun area. There's lots of things manufacturers can do. One of the things that we learned from cars is that we have lots of car problems. We have pedestrians, and we have rollovers, and we have side impacts and so forth. There's no one magic solution, but altogether there is. In the same way for guns, we have lots of gun problems, aspects of problems in the United States. And so what can manufacturers do?
So it's nibbling away at
That's
lots
right.
of little issues.
That's right.
To make a big
That's right. Even airbags in the United States only saves about 11% of fatalities, and they're incredible. So that's what we're going to have to do.
Give me a list.
Yeah, so in terms of manufacturing, what we can do in terms of, say, the homicide problem, one of the things is right now guns in the United States do not have unique serial numbers. The serial numbers are easily defaced, so it's very hard to trace the guns. We should do sort of much better on that. California right now requires ballistic fingerprinting on guns, so instead of waiting and trying to say, here's the bullet, and it matches all make models of the same gun, it's going to say, this bullet matches this gun. And that will make CSI stories probably less interesting, but we'll be able to catch criminals and won't be able to rob and murder again and again. We should have smart guns. A smart gun is one in which it's very difficult to steal. So, for example, years ago, my car radio got stolen. And then the next car I bought had a sign in the windshield that said, you can steal the radio, but it won't work. And people stopped stealing my radio. Same thing in guns. You can make guns, and they're made in Europe now, so that when someone steals your gun, they can't use it. Criminals get guns in lots of ways in the United States, but one enormous way is through theft. The estimate is that 400 or 500,000 guns a year are stolen and make it into criminal hands. And if we had smart guns, it would be much less likely that guns would be stolen and get into criminal hands.
But the mass shootings, like Newtown, like Columbine and so on,
right.
They got their guns legally. They didn't steal the gun.
That's right. So those don't solve that problem. Again, different problems. And the way I think the big problem with mass shootings is there's lots of things we can do.
Domestic violence shootings.
And domestic violence. Oh, there's all, and there's gun accidents. There's gun accidents, and there's gun suicides with lethal guns. One of the things we learn from motor vehicles, again, is the changing social norms really matter. When I was growing up, social drinking was common. It was illegal to drink and drive, but everybody did it. You knew, you went to a cocktail party. How are you going to get home? Of course you're drunk, and you were a little drunk when you went home. Now we had the designated driver program. We have friends don't let friends drive drunk. It's really socially unacceptable to drive drunk in the United States. And that's the one area where our driving has gotten much better, our drunk driving. So how can we sort of do the same thing in guns? And big way is to change social norms. One big way, again, is about theft of guns. We store our guns terribly in the United States, which makes it so easy. But another way is that I think there should be a social norm that if somebody is going through a bad patch, a bad spell, their wife left them, they've started drinking, that you as a friend, it should be known that you just get rid of the gun for a while, not permanently. Your friends help take the guns, as friends don't let friends drive drunk. Most of the mass shootings in the United States are suicides. The people who do these mass shootings look much more like our suicides than they do like our homicide perpetrators. And I would argue that in the Newtown tragedy, if the social norm had been you have a teenager or a very young adult who's going through a really bad period, the mother should have known this was just common. You'd just get rid of the guns for a while, just take him out of the house. Her friends should have said, little Adam is not doing well. He is, just staying inside all the time. He doesn't talk to us. All he does is play these violent video games. Maybe in a year he'll have a girlfriend and things will be fine. But right now, why don't we just store your guns for a while? You want to go shooting? Come just get them. And I think if they had done that, if that had been the social norm, there would not have been a suicide, there would not have been a femicide, she would still be alive, and 24 kids and teachers would still be alive.
Some people say that one of the problems here is that you haven't got good mental health services compared to other countries, and therefore people who need help don't get it.
Well, I think there's no question that we should improve our mental health services. We should reduce our racism. We should improve our parenting. There's all sorts of things we should do. But one of the things we should really, really do is do something about the easy accessibility of all kinds of guns to virtually anybody.
And you're also talking about celebrities setting the example.
Yeah, I mean, what you really want to do in all areas is have people who really matter set a good example. So I think in terms of the social norms.
So Clint Eastwood.
Yeah, Clint Eastwood doesn't set a good example. What you want is people who absolutely. You want everybody to set good examples. People, anybody who you're looking up to, you want to set good examples. You want the best bicyclists in the world to wear helmets all the time, and that sets a good example.
But you've got a problem with tobacco, for example, which is Hollywood.
Right.
And there have been studies which suggest there's a direct relationship between whether kids take up smoking and how many Hollywood movies they've seen with the celebrities smoking.
Yes.
Well, it's hard to pass a movie in Hollywood without guns.
Yes, but you should realize that 50 years ago or 40 years ago in Hollywood, everybody smoked in Hollywood, and it was sexy, and compared to then, very, very few people smoke, and it's considered in the United States, the social norm in the United States about smoking has just changed precipitously. Where it used to be glamorous and sexy, now it's like, I'm stupid and addicted, and who wants to kiss me if I'm filled with smoke and my mouth is filled? It's a whole different feeling, and I think we can do that with guns. I mean, one of the big problems with guns now is that this is the way in the inner city, if you're disrespected, that you have to stand up and do something. In the United States, 200 years ago, if you were a white male in the South and you were disrespected by another high-status white male, you had to fight a duel. Even though it was illegal, even though it was stupid, that was, you had to be a man, and that was changed over time. just by social norms. And that's another social norm that has to be changed in the United States, is that it's not that hard to change. The social norm that you should, if you're disrespected, you have to shoot somebody. No, if you're disrespected, what a man does is stand up for himself. It's a real person, not, oh, I only can protect myself with a gun. That's only wusses do that. Only weaklings do that. And I think one of the things that public health does, which is wonderful, is it gets all different kinds of groups together and to act and to help change not only laws but also social norms.
So is this a breakthrough for Barack Obama, rather than forcing some legislation that he's not going to get through Congress, to actually get other stuff through Congress which gets more concerted action, which is less of a threat to the National Rifle Association?
No, I think actually we'll find that the National Rifle Association is not as strong as people think. 30 years ago, we were all told that the strongest lobby in the world, not just the United States, was the tobacco lobby. And the tobacco lobby had huge, huge defeats in Congress over and over and by the American public. And I think the same thing can happen about guns, which we can have lots of guns, but we can have a situation where instead of dying with our guns, we can be living with our guns the same way we're living with our cars.
Professor David Hemingway is at Harvard School of Public Health, and he's also director of the Harvard Injury Control Research Center in Boston.